So now for the exciting part. What I want to do is bring up the console and start dragging in particular files. So you can see here that if I start dragging in my photograph, we have null, null, and null. That will be because the element that we're trying to fetch simply doesn't exist. Now, I've talked quite a bit about this data transfer object. We've used it to declare a particular drop effect. And we've also learned to bind a drag start and then set our data of that element. Now, instead of our drag me element, we're going to completely obliterate that and just remove it. And instead of our drag here, what I'm going to do is change this over to a folder icon. And then we're going to put drag to upload. We'll save this out and you can see that we have this more realistic looking file uploader. That also means that we can say goodbye to our nice pink box. We're not going to require this anymore. And instead, we're going to just create a nice H2 heading tag. We can say upload your files. And just to make things a little bit more exciting, we'll add some nice emojis. Now, when we save this out, it looks more like a typical file drag and drop that we might be used to. So I promised you that we would get to the more exciting stuff. We've learned a lot of the bare essentials to this drag and drop API. And don't worry if it is quite confusing. There are different parts to it that you might want to use, such as leave, over. And you can see that some of these are more for styling purposes rather than actually adding some behavior. This drag enter and drag leave, we're not really doing anything data oriented inside of here. However, for the drag over, we're dealing more with the DOM node events, drop effects, and this drop event is essentially where all the magic is happening. So our event.data transfer, let's have a deeper look at this. We don't need any of this at the moment, so we're going to take our event.data transfer. We can then look at this files property, which is on our data transfer object, and we've looked at this in the previous videos. So what happens is when we drag an image in, we can let go. You can see that we now have a length of 1 and a property of 0 with a file object. We also have this file list. So these are two things that we're going to cover in the next chapter. So the next chapter is going to follow on from this chapter. And I've done this deliberately because the file APIs are also a new addition in HTML5, and they are very worth breaking out into their own individual chapter. And then we can walk through them in a sensible, logical way. However, before we get there, it's essential that we learn how to drag particular files. So when we look at this file list, you can kind of guess what this file list is. It's a list of files. So we have this file object, and this allows us to essentially drag in local files from our machine and handle them with our JavaScript code. You can see that we have things such as the name. We also have the type of the file. We also have things like file size. So already there are features that we can implement. We can say, hey, this needs to be a specific file type, or hey, this needs to be a specific file size. And these are definitely things that you'll have seen out in the wild. And I'm very confident that you'll have dragged an image before into an uploader and it's told you that it's too large, and then you've gone back, resized it, and then re-uploaded it. And these are types of things that are commonly created with JavaScript. So we're going to learn how to do this as well. What I wanted to show you is this data transfer.files. So what we could do essentially is say something like const and then destructure and then reference our event.data transfer. This will then give us that files object as well. So this is a common pattern. We can then drag the file in and you can see that we have that particular file. We could say files square bracket 0 and that will give us that object first inside it. Of course, we just want the files array. Now that is because we could, for example, drop in 2 files and you can see that we now have a 0 index base. So this is an object where the key is in fact each image. And it's kind of like an array, but they call it a file list. You can see like an array, it has this length property. It doesn't really have any of the array prototype methods. It's more of a simple construct in JavaScript. However, much like an array, we can of course use square bracket 0 to get the first item, square bracket 1, and so forth. But it's more than likely that we will allow our drag and drop editor to drag multiple files in at once. I don't see why you would limit it to a single file unless it was, for example, to upload a single profile picture, which a single file does make sense. So in which case you could do something like square bracket 0 to make sure every time you are getting that single image. However, it's not really necessary in our use case. So what we're going to do in the next lesson is just bind one more event to our document to finish off learning about this drag and drop API. And then we're going to explore in detail this file API as well as the file list. We're then going to restrict particular files to be uploaded, because at the moment what I can do is drag in other kinds of files which we don't really want. If I'm trying to upload a photo, I don't want to upload some kind of recording file. So we're going to learn how to restrict to just images. So this is a really nice feature that we're going to add. We're also going to use something called the file reader to render out some thumbnails of the images that we've dragged in. So this is really nice. And we're also going to add a manual file input. This is something that's new to JavaScript and the web platform, and also post our uploaded files to a Node.js server, which I've also built for us.